All right, so for this video, we are going to look at this PDF and we are going to see all the facial aesthetics that they have to offer. And also that I'm not going to go through everything on this PDF, but I'm going to go through close to 1/3 of everything that is shown in this PDF. And I might even put the link to the PDF down in the description as well, and also my data sheet as well. So pretty much this is a facial examination profile study from Dr. Anna Maria and Grandia Luisa. I'm not sure if I'm saying her name right. And also this PDF is going to be fully in Spanish. So I pretty much interpret it, and I got it down in English. So yeah. And another thing too is that some people believe that some of my measurements or some of the measurements that I do use are not real measurements. And this is just another example of why these measurements are scientifically proven. And so they do have a lot of validity to it as well. So so we're going to get through it. And so these are usually the measurements that I usually use throughout my channel. All right, so I'm just reading the interpreted version of it, so just give me a minute. This method is about looking at the face to see if it's symmetrical. That's why I see that line in the middle. Symmetry means that one side is the same as the other. To do this, you got to divide the face in half, from the center of the forehead to the corners of the eyes. This also helps you to see the face is balanced and proportional. It's important to not to tilt the head or turn the face when doing this. And obviously, if you turn the head or tilt the face, you're not really balancing each portion of the face to determine whether it's balanced on each side. And as it can change however things look and make it harder to see the face if it's symmetrical. So this is pretty much can be its own measurement, now that I think about it. But honestly, I don't feel like it should. But normally when I do this, I don't really need to put a whole line down the middle of a person's face to analyze whether or not it's balanced between both parts of it. And symmetry does matter to a certain extent. Obviously, there are some things that are asymmetrical. One thing that I've noticed, especially from rating some of my subscribers' face, some of y'all have emailed me, or the best way y'all reach me is through my IG. One main thing that I noticed from my subscribers is that one cheekbone, it may be higher set than the other. But other than that, because that's usually kind of normal within reason. Other than that, I mean, most people don't really have a asymmetrical face overall. The only thing I can usually say is maybe the nose might be kind of crooked or turned. But other than that, everything else is pretty much fine. So this is usually a measurement that most people normally pass. But if, let's say, somebody has, I don't know, Down syndrome, just for an example, it will probably be more apparent to see that as well. So yeah. All right, so when we analyze the face, it is very important to consider the upper, middle, and lower third. And when we focus on the lower third, symmetry, similar to what is done in the radiograph, should be studied in the front face. To ensure its accuracy, the head must be perfectly oriented, and it should be confirmed that both the Frankfurt plane angle and the bipupillary plane are parallel to the floor. This helps maintain consistency in the analysis of facial features and proportions. Now, usually when I do my measurements, I typically don't make the Frankfurt plane angle. So I'm just do this right here. So this is the Frankfurt plane angle. I typically don't usually have it at a 0 degrees. I kind of have it at a tilt. The only thing is, as long as I know the degree that it's in, I don't need to make it like as flat as possible or as 0 degrees as possible. There's no need for that for me personally. Another thing too is that I also said that it goes from the top of that earlobe right here, as y'all guys can see. That's where it starts, and it actually undercuts the bottom of the orbital rim. So this right here is the orbital rim, and it actually undercuts that portion of the orbital rim. Now, when I first started, I kind of was messing up a little bit with the Frankfurt plane angle, because when I usually set the Frankfurt plane angle, I kind of did it a little bit higher set. So instead of it being closer to the bottom of the orbital vector, I kind of passed it right here. So it might be 1 to 2 degrees off with some of my old measurements that I've done, but it's not too big of a difference or anything like that. Just, small little things that I have noticed when I've done these sort of things. But yeah, I usually want to not mess up when measuring the Frankfurt plane angle, because it's one of those measurements where you have to be very, very accurate, just as accurate as the gonial angle, whether or not the person is high body fat or low body fat. There's one of those measurements where you just got to put a little bit of effort into it to see if you know what you're doing. All right, so this one doesn't really have a picture to the slide, but I'm gonna just explain what it's saying. So the initial clinicial assessment for the dental midline involves checking if they align. If there's a misalignment, it is important to evaluate the upper dental midline in relation to the facial midline anatomical structure, like the glabella, nose, camilla, philtrum, and the implantation of the superior labial frenulum are used in the reference points to assess the alignments during the parental smile. Deviations can occur due to the dental reasons or less commonly skeletal tissues. All right, so pretty much this is and I also did talk about it in one of my previous videos as well. So it's one of the ways to see if a person's face is balanced or is equal between both sides, and this is occurring more within the lower third or the lower portion of the face. So if you have a misalignment of the jaw, let's say the upper jaw is kind of going towards the left side and the lower jaw is going towards the right side, you can kind of tell by the philtrum groove, the nose, and just other parts of the face as well, because it kind of just everything lines up together. But if you do have a misalignment within that region, it'll be pretty easy to tell. I wish it did come with a picture though, because it would have made things a little bit more easier. But for me, honestly, the easiest one is honestly just the nose. Like the nose, if it's kind of going a different direction, I can pretty much easily tell. And when I'm doing measurements as well, I usually don't need to, divide the face in the middle or anything like that, because when I'm actually measuring somebody's face, I'm damn near looking at their face for a whole hour, essentially, so I can kind of just tell if there's something wrong with a particular part of the face in terms of asymmetry. So yeah. All right, so this is pretty much self-explanatory. This is the nasofrontal angle, which is the angle between the forehead and the nose. It is seen less critical because it is influenced by the prominence of the glabella, a part of the forehead between the eyebrows. This area varies widely among individuals, so deviations from the norm in this angle typically doesn't cause aesthetic issues. Surgical alterations of the glabella is infeasible due to the frontal sinus located behind it. All right, so the glabella is situated right here within this area, and this is the nasal bridge, and this is the nasion, the point where both sections meet. And pretty much, I believe this is a female, so she doesn't have that much of a prominent brow bone, but she does have a very rounded forehead. And usually what I do see with people with rounded foreheads, Sometimes it kind of does give them, depending on how rounded their forehead is, it could be a good thing in terms of nasal frontal angle. But when we're measuring the brow ridge inclination, they might not have an actual inclination. It might actually be the opposite, since it protrudes forward. It has a forward growth to it. But that's not what we're talking about here. It's just really talking about the brow bone, and it's going to get to our next slide as well too, so I'm glad it's talking about it. So the glabella is one of the main ways to tell how narrow the angle is probably going to be for the nasal frontal angle, and to see if they have a prominent brow bone as well. All right, so if we use the nasal mental measurement as reference at 100%, the upper portion corresponds to 43%. So that is from the nasion to the subnasal. That corresponds to 43%. And the lower portion, the subnasal to the mental, corresponds to 57%. This measurement helps assess the proportions of the face, with the upper and lower parts contributing different percentages to the overall length. So this is pretty much like the lower third deviation that I usually do. They just took it one step further. So y'all see the 2/3 right here, and you see the 1/3 right here. So this portion should be 33% of this lower portion right here. But the other step that they took it further is they pretty much did the whole 2/3 of the face without taking any of the upper portion of the face, and they went from this side, from the nasion, all the way to the subnasal, which is the 43% right here. And this is actually pretty much just the length of the actual nose itself. And the length of the nose is going to be less than the length of the lower portion of the person's face. And do I necessarily agree with that? Yes, the lower portion of your face should be more longer than the nose as well, but it shouldn't be too long, because I know for females, in terms of length for the nose, it shouldn't be that long anyway. But for men, this 43% might actually be a little bit different. But as I said again, men do have longer lower third proportions as well, so it might not be too big of a difference anyway. But yeah, this is just one step further that it took it to. But yeah, this is just another way to do it as well. But for me personally, I just do the 1/3. I feel like that's just easier, and yeah, you don't have to do too much measurements to see if somebody's really that attractive, honestly. So in this traditional vertical profile study, the face is divided into 3 equal thirds: upper, from the hairline to the glabella; middle, from the glabella to the base of the nose; and the lower, from the base of the nose to the chin. However, this method has limitations. The first is that the hairline can vary significantly, affecting the accuracy of the upper third measurement. The second is that the glabella, which marks the boundary between the upper and middle third, can be difficult to locate precisely, leading to subjective assessments, especially when it is not well defined. All right, so let me just start off with the glabella. Usually when I rate celebrities' faces, I do have a tough time measuring that glabella area. Now, I do understand that I have an idea where the area might be. It's going to be localized somewhere around this region, and usually it's going to be kind of above the orbital rim, kind of like right here. That's kind of just giving an idea, especially when I read some of the articles or reports to, have a good idea of where to start that portion of it. Butts is going to be situated like somewhere around the middle area of the brow bone. Now, the problem is when you are measuring, let's say, a female with a non-protrusive brow area, it will be a bit tough. You can't just go and measure, maybe a little bit up here or a little bit down here, because what it happens is that you want to be very precise with the measurements of this middle portion of the third, and also because it might affect their facial dimorphism as well. I also include that as well. Another thing too is that with the hairline, some people do have a, let's say, a non-defined hairline, so it is kind of hard to trace. Obviously, when I do rate, I make sure that I can see the whole forehead. But let's say if they have a little bit of baby hairs coming around, usually I try to get the top of that peak point. Some people do have, let's say if they have like blonde hair, it might be a little bit tricky to see the top of their hairline. Or even if the main one is if they have recessed hairline, or their hair is kind of recessed all the way back, almost like a Jason Statham, or even just a complete bald look, that can also mess up your upper portion of your third. So if your upper portion is very long, it might affect this measurement completely, and is gonna give you a bad rating as well. Some people can pull it off. I believe one of them was I think The Rock. The Rock pulled it off pretty well, and also I'm trying to remember. I believe Tupac also pulled it well, but most people cannot pull off the bald look. It's going to mess up their facial thirds as well. All right, the nasolabial angle. This is the angle formed between the base of the nose and the upper lip. To measure it, two lines are drawn starting from the subnasal point, one horizontal tangent to the most anterior point of the camella, and one vertical tangent to the edge of the upper lip. The normal range for this angle is between 90 and 110 degrees, with 90 considered the ideal. This angle can be used as a reference for planning corrections in case of dental or skeletal malformation of the upper jaw. A upturned nose will result in a more open angle. All right, so it's one thing to have an open angle, but if you have a malocclusion, so if your upper portion of your mouth extends far, so I know some ethnic people do have that, especially with African Americans, not all, but a good amount. That is really not something that you need to do any sort of correction to, because that is normal within reason. So I do kind of disagree with that. This is another thing. This is another reason why I'm doing this data sheet, so I can kind of give a person their attractiveness rating on a universal standpoint, and then I can also give their attractiveness rating from their ethnic group as well. So that's why I'm kind of separating everything individually, especially with measurements like this. Any measurement with any nose measurement, lip measurement, those are the main ones. Everything else, I'm not going to really do change. Maybe a little bit of the canthal tilt, I might change a little bit of that. But usually anything with nose and lips, there is a variation between ethnic groups. So don't take this measurement too seriously. But yes, a 90-degree angle is not a bad angle at all. For me, I have mine at around 94. And I think for females is around 96. It's a little bit higher than the 90 range. But in some studies, it even says anything more than 80 is good. So it kind of does have a pretty wide range, but I will agree more with the 90, honestly, especially when we're talking about the European standard of beauty. But like I said, that's why I'm doing my own data sheet, so I can, get different ranges for different groups. But yeah, so that malocclusion, just that upper portion protrudes farther. And if the upper portion of the lip or of the mouth, I should say, not the actual lip, but the mouth protrudes farther, you're going to get a more acute angle. Like you see right here, is going to be just more of an acute angle rather than this sort of, I don't know what angle this is. It looks like 100 degrees angle that you see right here, which is very, very wide. And this is something that you're just not going to see with every ethnic group, but it's still a good angle, and it's something that you would want to have. And especially an upturned nose is something that I believe anybody could achieve. Not everybody does have that, but anybody could achieve. But yes, the upper portion of the mouth, if it extends further, it will decrease that angle. All right, so this is going to be the last slide that I'm going to show y'all, and that will be a wrap for it. So this is a nasofacial angle, is the angle between the facial plane and the tangent line to the nasal dorsum. It accesses the balance of nasal projection in the patient's profile. And also, this is pretty much the interior angle of the face, not the exterior angle. If it was the exterior angle, like the nasomental angle that y'all normally see me do, that will be considering the facial profile assessment. But this is a little bit different. This is the interior version of it, rather than the facial convexity profile of the person's face. But yeah, so this assesses the balance of the nasal projection in a patient's profile. The normal range of this angle is between, or anywhere between, 30 to 40 degrees, and values closer to 30 degrees are typically considered more aesthetically acceptable for women, while values closer to 40 degrees are more preferred for men. All right, so let me explain this real quick with the values. I know for me, I actually have mine between 30 to 36 degrees for men and women. The reason why I do that is because, and I can understand why they have it lowered for women and higher for men. But the reason why I have it the same is actually because men actually have more forwardly grown chins and also a longer mandible, and they also have more projected noses. So if you add those two things together, it's still gonna be the same thing at the end of the day, because if a man has a more projected longer chin than a woman and a longer nose, you're still gonna have somewhat of a balance at the end of the day. It's not like they don't have a chin, but they have a longer nose. No. It's both that contribute to this angle. I'm also going to show a picture too right here. And this is going to be pretty much of a woman with a very long nose. And you can clearly tell a massive difference between it. And this is just a huge no-no. And I can see why they say that women typically have less protrusive noses. If your nose is very protrusive as a woman, it can kind of throw this measurement off completely, and also other measurements as well. But yeah, so this is pretty much it. And yeah, hopefully y'all like, subscribe, and comment down what y'all want to see next, and also comment down what celebrities I should do next. And yeah, peace.